All right, Rob.
Okay, as we get started today, obviously the exam one is on Tuesday. Exam one is on Tuesday. It's going to be chapter 3, it's going to be chapter 7, it's going to be chapter 4, and I'll get that fixed in there so that it says chapter 3 above those chapter 3 terms. You can kind of tell that chapter 4 has probably got a few more terms. You can probably tell that chapter 3 has probably got a reasonable amount of articles. Chapter 4, frankly, the opening chapter did as well. But basically, it's going to be all the terms and all the articles and then the chapter questions. What I'll do is I think tomorrow I'm going to sit down and write the exam. And when I write the exam tomorrow, I will send you guys an email and eliminate some of the chapter questions, eliminate some of the terms, and probably pull some of the articles. So with this in mind, what questions do y'all have? And let's just start with terms. And let's start with chapter 4 since that's the first chapter we did. Do y'all have any questions about any of the terms? Just to make sure that we're all clear on this. And I will answer any questions that you have.
A unitary system.
What was a unitary system? Because we were talking about a federal system, which was more of the American one.
Oh, it's like with a lot of parties can be elected.
Where a lot of parties can be elected. There's probably a better way.
So like central government has more power than the locals and stuff?
In fact, in a unitary system, there's really only one, or primarily one federal government, yeah. When you think about a federal system in the United States, you got your federal, you've got your state, and you've got your local, and powers get divided. Unitary is going to be one primary system. Yes?
Could you give an example of a country have a unitary system?
I was actually thinking Israel was a country that had a unitary
That's
system.
what I meant. That's what I meant.
Oh yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, I got you. I got you. Yes, Ray.
Do we talk about any like pros and cons of the unitary?
We really didn't, and these will probably, if you see something with these, they'll be straight definitions. There'll be straight definitions with these. If you notice up here, you got 4 terms: political science, politics, politicians, and polity, which was really from the intro. Those are pretty much going to be straight definitions as well. So with those and then unitary and federal, those should be fairly straightforward kinds of things. What else do you have from chapter 4?
I would like to go over 2 things.
Go ahead.
Characteristics of effective, yada yada yada.
The characteristics of the states. If you look at this, this was the one where I had read that quote about the gun. And I believe it was a little box. Yeah, it's on page 60, talking about weak, effective, and failed states. Do y'all remember talking about that at all?
Yeah.
The effective states were the ones that basically had the rule of law that went throughout the country. If they had a law, they were able to enforce it. They could collect the taxes. They're probably not perfect in terms of corruption, but corruption is fairly minimal type things. And really the trick with an effective state is they can basically they can impose their rule of law all throughout the country. When you start getting into the weaker states, that line begins to blur and corruption gets stronger. And if you remember when we were talking about that one, sometimes there might be areas of the country, maybe it would be rural areas that are far away from the civilization or the capital, maybe it would be just a particular centralized area that's trying to do its own thing, but they're not able to impose their will throughout. And then when you get into the failed states, and this is where I read this, there is no law besides the gun. And it says here that basically warlords, militias, things like this do what they want to do. And in fact, they say maybe that they have a government, but it's really kind of an embarrassment.
So it's basically like Somalia.
Yeah, and Somalia was an example. I think with the effective states, they had given the United States, they had given European countries typically, they had given Japan as examples. And then when you start getting into those weaker states, that's where you start getting into more of the African countries because of the corruption rising to varying degrees, varying levels. So that's what those are. These, the terms for this exam are going to be a little bit more minimal than I usually do because it's going to be an article-heavy exam. I'm not going to lie to you. But these terms, a lot of these are going to be straight kind of definitions. And this would be maybe one that could be subject to an essay question. Characteristics of weak, effective, and failed states. This might be the only one of the terms. What else do y'all have up here? Because really, the big four terms, when you go back to this, are probably going to be laissez-faire, welfare state, statism, and socialism. Are y'all comfortable with those?
Can you go over statism one more time?
Yeah, sure. Well, what were the two questions? Because if you remember from the actual outline, I had said that basically states face two questions dealing with economic issues. Do you remember what they were?
Redistribution, is that what it
That is, how much the state should be allowed to redistribute, and
was? Regulation?
regulation, how much the state should be allowed to regulate. Now, when you think back, and why don't we just go ahead and take them in order, maybe from easy to hard. And statism, I believe, was the last one I did. The one that we did at the beginning was laissez-faire. Do you remember what laissez-faire was as far as the government's role with regulation and redistribution?
Hands off.
Hands off. Laissez-faire literally translates to,
Hands off.
okay, no, that's close, but it literally translates to allow one to do. To allow one to do. So basically what they're saying here is government should be hands off. The government that governs best is the government that governs least, in fact, yeah. And when you think about it, when it comes to regulation, they said no. When it comes to redistribution, they also said no. And their argument is that each individual should rise and fall on their own merits. Their argument was the economy should basically run itself because government will mess it up. Do you remember the article that I gave you that was the example of laissez-faire?
It was the U.S. government doesn't give any paid vacation.
Paid vacations is a really good example of this. And what was the story behind the paid vacations article? Anybody?
That Americans take less vacation time. Wasn't it about? It was about how we don't get vacation.
The United States government does not mandate paid vacations, as opposed to many of the European countries. And what was the logic behind guaranteeing paid vacations? What's the logic behind guaranteeing people time off?
A happy worker gives a happy product.
A happy worker gives a happy product. And remember, we're filming this, okay, so I will keep this in mind. Okay, when you think about it, the idea is that old phrase, are we working to live or are we living to work? And the European mindset, or these countries that guarantee the paid vacations, is we're working to live. And the sense is that if you give a number of weeks of vacation, you get the ability to recharge, you get the ability to de-stress, you get the ability to spend time with family or do things that you want. The American mindset is, no, I should not have anybody limiting me by forcing me to have paid vacation, or in fact, if you, Sergio, decided that you wanted to negotiate your own vacation, you should be able to do that on your own and not have the government basically hold you back from that. So when you think about it, Americans work an awful lot of hours. The vacation oftentimes is a 3-day weekend, and to be honest, sometimes it translates, sometimes it doesn't. Do you remember what the American earned on average, or pardon me, made goods or services that they made in an hour in the United States? Oh, that's a big one. What was the average hour? Because we had talked about this, if you remember, and I'll just go ahead and pull this article up, talking about, this was the States one, and this was paid vacations. The United States, were we the most productive workers in the world? No. You remember who it was?
Norway?
Here we go. Let's get in here. If you notice, and it comes down, and you're right, it was Norway, Daniel. Norway produced 62.66. France, oft criticized France, it says. Ireland, the United States, $47.42 an hour. So the argument is that while we work a lot of hours, we're still fairly productive. I think I had mentioned in class the U.S. has risen to #1 now on more current ideas. But if you notice up here, France, Spain, Sweden, Germany, Australia, even China guarantees paid vacations that the U.S. doesn't, because, as Jessica, you said, it's a hands-off approach to the economy. What, the second one on this, and let me delve into this one a little bit. I believe the next one we had gotten into was welfare state. What did the welfare state believe? Go ahead.
Basically, welfare state believed in this government regulation.
Okay.
But, oh wait,
It was
it's regulation versus redistribution.
Yeah, regulation versus redistribution.
They wanted more redistribution, but not as much regulation.
Yeah, they did. They wanted redistribution, but not as much regulation. Jessica, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I wrote down provide cradle to grave protection.
Yeah.
And it was a European ideal.
Yeah, when you think about welfare in the American